There is a new head coach in the land of Pittsburgh. The Mike Tomlin era, the era that has occupied the entirety of myself and David's lifetimes, has moved on from the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. But very quickly, Mr. Rooney found himself a new head coach by the name of Mike McCarthy? Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on a second. Mike McCarthy? What happened to Shula? What happened to Shieldhass? Shieldhass would have been a perfect Pittsburgh guy. They wouldn't have said his name right for 50 years. We got the actual Pittsburgh guy, though, Mike McCarthy. 62-year-old Mike McCarthy. I don't know if this was a shock to you, David, but I saw the rumors maybe a couple of days, or maybe even just a day or so before it actually happened, and I'm thinking to myself, really? He's on the docket for this hiring process? And then, very quickly, he's the head coach. So now this is the episode. This is what we're breaking down here today. Mike McCarthy is the new head coach. What are your first takes, David? Because this is very fresh for both of us.
Yeah, it was definitely fresh and definitely a surprise. Going into the head coaching search, his name was not even on my mind. I remember when it first came up, I was like, like that's odd. Not a fan. I'd rather go with somebody fresh. But like, okay, we'll probably just interview him and move on. Like he's a filler interview or something. And then I was out with Kaylee and my brother and sister-in-law and one of my nieces. And my friend who's a Dolphins fan sends me a text and says, "I'm sorry." And so my immediate thought is, oh no, we just hired the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins as our head coach. So that's where my mind goes. So I look it up. I'm like, who did we just hire? Who did we just hire? And it was Mike McCarthy. And I was like, okay. It's not Brian Flores. It's not the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Maybe it wasn't who I wanted the most. But me and my dad have been texting a lot, specifically about the coach and specifically about McCarthy. And we both were of the mind that, like, is it our favorite choice out of the names that we were looking at? Just off of like, I don't know, what's the word? Like just off of first looks. No. But I am not upset at all that he's our choice, especially after the press conference. I think that, we'll dive into this. I think his history speaks for itself. I think that there's a lot of recency bias with a lot of the hate that's coming on. And Pittsburgh Nation is pretty getting after him pretty bad. And, it's interesting, like, I was that guy who was going after Mike Tomlin for a lot of years. So I get it. And like, if you're upset about this, I understand why someone's upset, but I'm not. I think that this could be a good thing, specifically where our locker room is at right now.
So here's the interesting thing from my perspective. And it's funny because I think like maybe a week ago, early on last week. So this happened on Saturday. And early on last week, my boss, who was a Steelers fan, comes up to me at my desk and says, "So who are the Steelers going to hire?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know yet. I mean, it's pretty fresh. Obviously, it was only just over a week at that point that we had just lost. And so it's like, okay, I haven't really given a whole lot of thought to this." And he says, "We're going to hire Mike McCarthy and we're all going to be happy about it." And I said, "Wait, whoa, where did that come from?" And he said, "I went to high school with Mike McCarthy." And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, that's interesting. So my boss has a lot of Pittsburgh connections, and obviously Mike McCarthy is a Pittsburgh native. And after that conversation, it was a very fleeting conversation, and I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, really? Is this what we're going to settle for? And it was kind of like you, where it's like, no, it was not my first option, nor was it really even an option on my board. But then that conversation just got my wheels thinking. I'm like, I don't like the idea of Mike McCarthy. But then the hiring actually happens. And then I start to get all like the sides of the arguments, like, oh my gosh. And I think Steelers Nation in the very early moments of the hiring said, I don't like this hiring. And I was probably in that field as well. I think over the last couple of days, I've warmed up to it just a little bit. But here's what I'll pose to you, and I want to get your take on this. I'm not as concerned with who we hired. I'm more concerned about the process as to how we hired him. And I'll explain that just briefly before you comment. I'm not so sure why we couldn't have waited just a couple extra days to have those interviews with all the Rams coaches, both being Shula and Shieldhass, who Shieldhass is definitely younger, maybe not cut out for a head coaching specific job, but Shula specifically, I think a lot of people were saying this fits the mold for Steelers head coaches in the last half century because he's younger. He's got that mindset. He's got a new flavor to the game that he's bringing with him. And I wasn't very thrilled with the fact that we couldn't have waited until the Rams were finished. And, sure, if they would have won against the Seahawks just a couple of days ago, we were going to have to wait another 2 weeks for the Super Bowl to get finished up and whatnot. But that didn't happen. And we didn't even wait to see if it would happen or not. And now they're free on the market. So I think the process with which we operated is the thing that I'm more concerned about. I'll let you kind of give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think that there was the process, and I think I touched on this in our last episode, or like I was just thinking of it more and more. Or no, once I heard the quote that Rooney didn't want to get rid of Mike Tomlin at all, I became immediately concerned for this hiring process because Rooney, the new Rooney's a businessman, and like he just doesn't think sports like I think sports fans do, and so I was immediately concerned, and I think that this was a mishandling of the hiring process. Again, I haven't been negative really on Mike McCarthy. I'm actually on, like, if I'm, as far as Steelers fans go, I'm in the positive. Like, I've defended him at my work, even when, like, I'm still not, like, loving it, but I'm like, I think it's totally fine. But I'm defending him at work. I'm talking, like, in other group chats and stuff. So I think that being said, Mike McCarthy interviewed 2 other coaching jobs, both already filled. There was no pressure for him to get another job. Like he had no one knocking on the door. So there was no rush for us to go after him. And like you said, we couldn't have waited 2 days to get these in-person interviews. Now I've heard something that has really kind of helped inform a little bit of some things. There's my good family friend Super Bowl Paul sent me and my dad this whole long thing that there's a reporter in Pittsburgh who like talks on the Steelers. He did like a live, like he does every once in a while, like chat where fans can just ask questions. And apparently there's been some rumors going around that both Shieldhouse and Shula were unimpressive in their interviews and that Shula was almost uninterested and maybe withdrew his name. And he didn't confirm any of those things. And I don't think we'll know if that's true or not. But that would be interesting if that was the case and would make more sense with the way we hired things or with the way we, hired McCarthy. But I agree that I don't like how it went. You can say like they said that they were enamored by Mike McCarthy and like he just had a great interview and he probably did. But I think that it's just like there was no need to make that choice that soon unless they truly are just in love with this guy and felt like there was no other person that was right for them.
That's interesting on those perhaps ambivalent personalities that happen in those hiring processes. And if that is the case, then sure, you don't want to entertain that for longer than you have to. But again, to your point, McCarthy was not a hot commodity necessarily. I think people associated with him with Pittsburgh because, yes, he's a Pittsburgh native. And, we're willing to give that hometown discount in a way to a guy that loves Pittsburgh, that is deeply rooted in Pittsburgh. But again, at the same time, if he's not in the market for any of those other coaching jobs, then why did we work so fast? And I know that the NFL is very different from a lot of other sports where if a coach gets fired in a different sport, usually it takes a little bit of time, in the off season for, those organizations to find their next head coach. Like baseball specifically, I think, they go long periods of time without having really anything go on. And even similarly in the free agent market, it takes forever for free agents to sign. Heck, there's still free agents that haven't signed now and spring training is coming up. The NFL is not like that. The NFL works lightning fast, even to the point where the conference championships just finished up and like, how many head coaching vacancies do we have to start the offseason? Like they're almost all full by now, which is unbelievable. So I guess I understand that just systematically in the NFL, it makes sense that these people are hired so quickly. But again, I feel like they didn't do their diligence to really shop around and find the right next guy. And again, not to say that Mike McCarthy isn't the right next guy, but I just don't think that their process was very sound.
No, I agree. And I think there's 2 reasons, I think, one more than the other that I think are possible for that. And I think that one of them is that Rooney is just deathly afraid of a rebuild. And with McCarthy, like, look, he might have a meh year to start, but you can probably bet in his second year we're going to be in the playoffs. And likely have more than 11 wins or 11 wins because that's his MO. Like his second year has been amazing. So I think that that was probably the biggest reason, was wanting someone who could win now and immediately, because again, we do have guys on our team, though our roster is rough. We have guys on our team that we could win now with. But I think this is my biggest negative of the whole thing. And, they're not going to confirm or deny this. I mean, the press conference, it sounded like this was probably part of the negotiation, is that it looks like a chunk of the reason that he's here is we want Aaron Rodgers to be back for another year, which I do not like at all. It worries me a lot. And I think it's just, I don't know. I think that Aaron Rodgers has passed his days, even with Mike McCarthy. And, I want to actually pose a question to you here. I'll set up the scene because this is something that I've known nothing about. But apparently there's a lot of hype around Will Howard. Apparently Mike McCarthy has been quoted a few times as loving the potential of Will Howard and really, really excited about him. There's been people within the Steelers organization calling him the next Tom Brady, which is insane. And, I wouldn't really hold any merit to that if they weren't in the organization and seeing something at least that looked like, oh, maybe there is potential here. So it sounds like there's a lot of potential with him, which is like really interesting. And I'd much rather not delay that another year. And granted, he hasn't had an NFL snap, but I just don't think that. Anyways, so my question to you is kind of going into this, do you think that this hiring of Mike McCarthy had anything to do with who we want to head our offense going into next year?
Very simply, yes, absolutely. I think that, honestly, it probably occupied a large chunk of that process. And for that reason, I'll go back to my original point in that I think that Rooney, to your point as well, I think he wants that stability. He doesn't want to go into that rebuild. He doesn't want to break it down and rebuild from the screws. He's bringing in a guy with tenure, something that has not happened in Pittsburgh sports as far as the head coaching goes in literally a century. And he's also bringing back Aaron Rodgers. And it seemed like in the press conference, McCarthy was pretty much saying it's guaranteed that he will come back. I think originally when he first answered the first question on that regard, he's like, well, yeah, obviously I'd like him back with the obvious tenure that I've had with him. But then later on, he said the offense with Rodgers. And it wasn't prompting him. Nobody was prompting him to say that. So it's like, this is already in his mind that Rodgers is coming back. And heck, I'll give it a 99% chance that Aaron Rodgers comes back this next season. And I think, interestingly enough, Aaron Rodgers was quoted as saying, if Mike McCarthy becomes the next head coach of the Steelers, then I'll come back. But we saw even in the few moments that we had when we knew that Mike Tomlin wasn't coming back, Aaron Rodgers was like, no, absolutely, I'm not coming back, because I came a lot for the reason that Mike Tomlin was the head coach. So in that little purgatory, Art Rooney, he sees that. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have Aaron Rodgers next year. What am I going to do without Mike Tomlin? What am I going to do without all these winning seasons? And I think he pushed the button so quickly because he knows that if he gets McCarthy and Rodgers, he's going to at least get some semblance of stability. It's not going to be long-term stability necessarily, but in the short term, he just wants it. He wants that winning season. He wants that playoff revenue from the one game that you might get at home, even though they haven't had a lot of home playoff games in the last 10 years. There's the chance for that. And that's, again, what's going back to my original point is like, I don't like the way that this is looking because I feel like Rooney is he's just showing his hand. And we talked about this actually a year ago, that yes, Mike Tomlin was a problem, but in a roundabout way, it was almost a bigger problem that that Rooney was the one that was doing all these things in the behind the scenes realm. So again, there's concern for that. And I absolutely, to answer your question, I think that absolutely is the reason why that he hired Mike McCarthy. And I think Aaron Rodgers, again, is the big reason for that, which, again, to your point about Will Howard, it makes me confused. Because if you want that stability with Aaron Rodgers, again, why would you want to delay figuring out what you have in Will Howard? You said that you wanted to find that out. I frankly want to find that out. But doing both of these two things, it doesn't exactly make sense. If McCarthy likes him, that's great. But if you bring Aaron Rodgers back, then what's Will Howard going to do, you know?
Right. And I think that, you also run the risk of like, look, we saw what he put out on the field last year, and like, yes, the offense will be different, and there'll be a new offensive coordinator, but like if he starts to put that out, like he's got a short leash if Aaron Rodgers comes back. Like I'm not gonna, be like, fine, he's Aaron Rodgers, give him the whole year. I'm gonna be like, listen, like if the offense is still struggling with him at the helm, like let's just let it rip. And it's like, is Mike McCarthy gonna do that? I don't know. So I think that I completely agree, and that's why it was so rushed and why the button was pushed so quickly. And it just puts us in that weird stance. The positive is that Aaron Rodgers has reportedly treated Will Howard very great and has been really great in the quarterback room and really helped them. And I mean, hey, another year under Aaron Rodgers, learning from his just beautiful football mind, like that can only help Will Howard really. And I guess he isn't getting that much older when it comes to the quarterback age. So it is interesting. I think that, we'll see what Aaron Rodgers does. He's been dead silent, I feel like, for a little bit now, even though it hasn't been that long. It just felt like a while because he's been so loud for a while. It'll be interesting to see when he finally comes out with that official statement, because I think that will decide a lot of things. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm really interested to see. I think they emphasized this a little bit in the press conferences, who his coordinators are. I think that's going to be huge because one of the reasons why I think I'm positive about McCarthy is his tenure. He did some amazing things at Green Bay, and Dallas, who, let's face it, is a horribly run organization. He had 3 12-win playoff seasons, only one playoff win, but there's a crazy statistic. Since 1996, he accounts for half of their 12-win seasons. So that's saying something pretty crazy. And he made Dak Prescott an MVP candidate. And so I think that, the defensive coordinator is going to be really, really important, because if he picks the right guy, I think we're going to be in good shape, because we saw that with Dan Quinn and in Green Bay. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Interestingly, offensively, I did a couple of comparisons with McCarthy and Mike Tomlin. And again, this is a very different style of coaching that we're going to see between these two head coaches, even though their tenures are very similar as far as their records and their playoff experience goes. Here's an interesting stat. In 24 seasons of calling plays, Mike McCarthy has had 14 of those 24 seasons in the top 10 in the NFL in points for in the offensive category, which is pretty incredible. And 4 of those years, he had the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL. Mike Tomlin, in 19 seasons, and again, he's not the coordinator, but again, under his tutelage and his head coaching time, he only had 6 seasons with a top 10 offense out of the 19 years that he was the head coach of the Steelers. So again, very different styles of coaching. Obviously, Mike Tomlin, very defensively oriented. McCarthy, very offensively oriented. But McCarthy even said in his press conference, if he can find the right defensive coordinator, and if he can put together the right defense on the field, the offense will speak for itself more than likely. And if the defense plays the way that it needs to play, especially with the price tag that's associated with it currently, then there could be a lot of success there.
Yeah, and I think that, like, diving into this press conference a little bit, like, I like Mike McCarthy. Like, I think I've never disliked him except for the fact that he beat us in the Super Bowl. I think that the way he talked, like, there were so many things he said that is so opposite to how Mike Tomlin coached, and that just, oh man, lit me up. He said a lot. Like, this press conference got me excited. Like, one, he said that he's only ever had one top 5 defense, and that year they won the Super Bowl. So it's like, if he can get a guy that's going to get a great defense, that he just put that statement out there. What was the other thing? Kind of going, yeah. Offensively, he's such a great mind also when it comes to that, and he understands that the game evolves and he figures it out year after year. I was looking through his coaching tenure. He coached with Joe Montana and the Chiefs, and then was with the Saints as offensive coordinator, and did some good things with them, and then Green Bay and ran that offense, and then did something completely different with the Cowboys. And it's like, he understands that you need to evolve and grow and get different and get better. And I think that we had the exact opposite. Mike Tomlin, there was zero adaptation to the new football. Like it was 2007 football, or there was nothing else. And with McCarthy, it is very different. It is like we've got to, keep up with things. We've got to see what's going on around the league. We've got to adjust. We got to adapt. And then the big word that we say that Mike Tomlin couldn't do was development.
I wrote that down on my paper. I loved when he said that. That literally lit me up.
Yeah, and it was so amazing because they mentioned like talking about the wide receivers, like with Jordy Nelson and stuff, and he was like, it wasn't like we went out and got somebody. It was like we just developed who we had. We looked at matchups of number 3 on number 3. It's like we just worked with what we had, and we worked our guys getting better. And it sounds like he really just loves to make guys better. Like he really just loves that process of development and working with them, specifically with quarterbacks, but then also like wide receivers. And that was just so encouraging to see, like, this guy really does enjoy just making his players better. And like what we've said the whole time is what do coaches do? Put their players in better positions to win. He literally word for word said that, specifically for the quarterbacks. And so I love that. And then you add in the emotional, him getting straight up into tears right off the bat, just being a Steeler coach, talking about how he wrapped up his baby in Steelers clothes and doesn't have to hide his Steelers gear anymore. I mean, like, he's a fan. He's a fan. Like all of that stuff sounds like gold.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And again, I kind of started from my perspective a little bit somberly, but not in as far as Mike McCarthy goes, because after hearing this press conference, I'm right there with you. I was overjoyed. When I heard him say the word develop, I almost fell out of my chair. I could not believe it. And that's one of the few words that I wrote on my piece of paper, just to highlight what he said in that press conference. Develop. We've talked about that so much, and you wrap a bow right around that so perfectly. Now, I want to ask you about this, and I don't want to reiterate what you said because I think you hit it on the hammer. He said in his press conference that he wants to run a West Coast style offense. Now, from my understanding, that is more short horizontal passes that are high percentage that are, again, putting your quarterback in a position to succeed. Is that so different than what he did with Dallas? Because from my perspective, the Dallas offense that he was in was much more just air raid. And again, that's what Dak Prescott. And maybe I'm just trying to get to this point of asking you, is that him adapting to his surroundings in real time? Or is that just me not making some connection somewhere?
I think it very well might be. And I think that's a great point because, yeah, I didn't watch a lot of Dallas football, but that's what I remember when I think of anything about Dallas from his time there is just, we're going deep. Like, the Terry Bradshaw quote, like, we're just chucking it and seeing what happens. And like, I think that is not West Coast, but I like the idea of a West Coast because I think that, our offense is just horrible. Like, we don't need to talk about it anymore. I really do like that because I think that what was missing in Dallas was a really good, like a good run game. And he mentioned that, like, I think he emphasized that when he was talking about the quarterbacks, was like, how do you help your quarterbacks? Like, he said one thing and then also said, you run the ball, like you run it well. And I think that, working with Joe Montana in Kansas City probably kind of helps bring in some of that. And I think that is a great offense to go to. That's what New England succeeded at so much. It wasn't necessarily West Coast, but it was those short, high percentage throws with a great run game. And I think that excites me. I like that kind of offense. And I think that is an offense that could fit Pittsburgh well. I think we like to run the football. And I would just love to see a pass attack that looks good. We haven't had one of those since the middle of the year of 2020.
Right. That's what I just wanted to get your take on because, again, when he said West Coast, and again, I'm not a football brain. You're much more football brain than I am. I looked it up, and I'm like, that does not look like what he did in Dallas. And again, that's just me trying to put together the pieces of saying, he looks like he's already adapting to what the Pittsburgh style of offense needs to be for it to be successful. With the way that it's already built, this is him inserting what it should look like to be successful. And again, with whatever pieces he has at his disposal, which it sounds like he's pretty much putting that all on Omar Khan, and he's just going to let him have the keys to the draft and do all that type of stuff, which I'm fine with. I think, again, that's just kind of seeing him adapt in real time, which, again, we haven't seen that out of Mike Tomlin. He didn't adapt. But if we're already seeing it and he hasn't even been in the building for more than 24 hours, then that's me saying I'm encouraged by that. I'm loving to see that.
Yeah, and I think that so like the way you said that kind of clicked in my brain, like that adapting. Like I think that's something that Mike Tomlin hasn't done, and we've seen this. Like how many times have we questioned why are we throwing to this guy at this point? Why are we not running the ball with this guy at this point? I think that Mike McCarthy is looking at our roster and just immediately adapting to it. I think that if you go when I think of West Coast offense, you got to think of the 49ers. And I think when you think of West Coast offense, what is the pinnacle staple of the West Coast offense? It is a dual threat running back that is equally in the receiving game and the rushing game. Guess what? We have two of those. And we specifically have one in Kenneth Gainwell if we hopefully sign him back. And I think that he sees that and saw what happened when we relied on Kenneth Gainwell a lot with our offense and is like, all right, let's lean into that. Let's use that. Okay, maybe we'll draft a wide receiver. Maybe we won't. Hopefully we will. But let's lean into this. We have these guys that can be these dual threats that are kind of, such a strong feature point of a West Coast offense. That's so encouraging to think maybe he is looking at our roster and saying, okay, let me, like he was saying, help you be better and not be like, no, this is the offense I run. This is what I did in Dallas. We're going to do it here. It's like, no, how are you guys going to be a better offense? And I just, again, like what you said, we haven't seen that in 19 years.
And even thinking about guys like Pat Fryermuth, go for it. Talk.
No, I was going to just a quick comment. I was going to say my fantasy team, I am so hopeful because I have Jalen Moore and Pat Fryermuth. And I'm like, I know what he did with the tight ends in Dallas. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm salivating at what he could do with Pat Fryermuth.
Might be a big turnaround for your fantasy team, which, hey, spoiler alert, David has an audio clip that he's going to share with us in due time. So I'm not going to spoil that necessarily, but keep an eye out for that in the next couple of days here on the podcast. I think you guys are going to really enjoy that as far as David's fantasy team goes. But back to the tight ends and specifically Pat Fryermuth. Again, it seems like Mike McCarthy enjoys looking at people's skills and utilizing their skills. Not, again, conforming to a mold, but saying, hey, let's make you the best version of you that you can possibly be offensively. And if that's the case, we're going to see more Pat Fryermuth. He's going to be happier. He's going to live up to his paycheck. He's actually going to be integrated into the passing game. And heck, if Aaron Rodgers, in the history, a history that he enjoys having the good tight ends, we might see a career year out of Pat Fryermuth. Just again, in the 24 hours that he's been here, the mind of Mike McCarthy is inciting a lot of just real positivity as far as an offensive game plan goes. And again, while Aaron Rodgers is not exactly who he needs to be, if they get their two minds together and if they get on the right page, then it might be a very good thing.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think that we have a lot of tools that could fit for this West Coast offense. And I think that all you really have to say to Omar Khan is just listen, just give me a genuine wide receiver too. Because if you look back at the 49ers, in the early years, if you look at, okay, what was their thing? What made their offense so great? Before Jerry Rice, it was a great tight end in Dwight Clark, and then their dual running back. And then when Jerry Rice came in, you have him, who's the best wide receiver ever in the NFL. DK Metcalf isn't the best wide receiver in the NFL, but if you're looking at just tangible skills, he has the speed, he has the height, he has everything in the makings to be the best number one receiver in the league right now. You look at then Jonathan Taylor, who was the wide receiver 2 of that 49ers team, he had some great years and some great plays. Would he have done that as a number one? Probably not. It's we don't need another number one. Just go get a number 2. And I think that that could complete this West Coast offense that maybe McCarthy's trying to build right now, which, it puts us, I think it's putting a smile on everybody's face.
The interesting new pivot would be, okay, what do we want to do with the coordinators? Because, hey, surprise, Arthur Smith is gone. Unfortunately for you, he's going to Ohio State, which, my condolences there, bud.
Yeah, the only thing I have to say to that is out of the frying pan and into the fire, because I think I texted in some group chat. I was like, well, I can't wait to see Jeremiah Smith disappear this year, because that's what's going to happen.
Hopefully that doesn't happen for your sake. I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I just thought that was kind of humorous that you got rid of him and then you didn't,
Yeah. What are the odds? I don't think anyone expected him going to college, first off, let alone to my Ohio State Buckeyes. what are you gonna do? But hey, you know what? Even though I love Ohio State, Steelers are always my number one. So I'm still happy that he is not on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
There's a good thing for you. Now with the defensive coordinator, I'm a little bit worried that, again, as the head coach, he has the say in that. I don't know if Terrell Austin is the right answer. Again, it seemed like he was just kind of a ghostwriter in his time under Tomlin because he didn't really necessarily do anything under Tomlin because everybody knows that the defense was Tomlin's baby. I think we have to find another option somewhere as far as a defensive coordinator goes. And I'm not nearly prepared enough to talk about that now, but it seems like the process, for as fast as it was to get McCarthy in the building, it seems like that process is going to go pretty fast so that they can really get a full offseason of work and just minds under the same building getting things figured out. So is there any concern with you as far as what the defense looks like post Mike Tomlin under an offensively minded head coach?
I don't, because I think that's something that we've seen, I think, kind of in college and NFL, and this isn't across the board, but with defensive coordinators, we've seen that, like, there's a good chunk of them that are just good defensive coordinators, and they aren't good coaches or head coaches. Like, they for some reason, it just can't click, you know? And so I think I'm very excited for there to be just a defensive coordinator who that's all he does. And like he has his defense. There is nobody above him, like puppeting everything or yeah. And doing all that and like just letting them be a defensive coordinator. I think Mike McCarthy has a great track record. I'm forgetting the name of the defensive coordinator for Green Bay when they were kind of in their heyday, but I don't know what he ended up doing, but obviously he had a good defense. He knew Mike McCarthy knew what he was doing bringing in Dan Quinn because Dallas had a great defense when Dan Quinn was there. So I do think he's going to bring in the right person. And I think honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a little bit longer than expected for the coordinators because Mike McCarthy was saying that in that 2019 gap year before he went to Dallas, like he didn't feel like a gap year. Like he was working, like he was getting ready. And so when he went into Dallas, he probably knew who his coordinators were going to be. But it sounds like, last year he really took time to be with family and really just kind of rested. And so it might take him a little longer. I'm sure he has some people in mind. But I don't think, like what you were saying, Terrell Austin's the guy. I looked a little bit into his history, and I think that his major defensive coordinator history was with Cincinnati when Marvin Lewis was there. That doesn't impress me at all. So I do think that we'll see him out too. And I mean, this is kind of what we asked for. We asked for a clean sweep of our coaches, and I think that's where we're headed, and we're headed for a whole different theology of coaching.
Yeah, I agree. And interestingly, I don't know if this is the name you're looking for, but Dom Capers, is that who you're looking for as far
Yeah.
as? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So part of that, I wanted to talk about this too. The interesting thing about coaching trees, and we talk about it with Tomlin all the time. Tomlin does not have a coaching tree, but Mike McCarthy does. And he obviously trusts his defensive coordinators to do the bulk of the work as far as the defense goes because he's the offensive play caller. He runs the offense. That's his baby. But he's had some defensive coordinators that have gone on to be head coaches. Dom Capers was a head coach before he became the defensive coordinator under Mike McCarthy. Ben McAdoo was a head coach. Kellen Moore was a head coach. I believe Mike Nolan was also a head coach for a short amount of time. And then you got guys like Dan Quinn and Mike Zimmer who have coaching trees of their own. So again, what does that say about Mike McCarthy and his own philosophy and him setting his staff up to be successful at large? Because again, you read down those names, especially guys like Dan Quinn and Mike Zimmer, who again, maybe haven't had the success as head coaches, but they are head coaches for a reason, and they still are, or still were at least in the case of Dan Quinn. So that's another aspect of this too. McCarthy doesn't have to be the smartest guy in the room, it doesn't seem like. And that's a problem that we've voiced very often with Mike Tomlin. So what does that say about whatever this hiring is going to be for the defense coordinator, if he does choose to go that route? What does that tell you about, the difference between he and Mike Tomlin?
Well, I think it's very encouraging. It could even mean that when who knows what Mike McCarthy's tenure will be like, but if it goes well and he's here for a few years, it could even mean that his coordinator is bound and ready to take his job and will like it, which I don't think we would have ever been able to say under Mike Tomlin. Like the coordinators always just, besides Keith Butler, always just felt like, kind of like junior staff. Like they didn't feel and it was genuinely true. Like Todd Haley didn't have a job when he wasn't with us. And, I mean, defensive coordinator didn't change too much, but with offensive coordinators, like it was just, yeah. I mean, Matt Canada, you could go on and on, and I think that it'll be really interesting to see who he chooses and how that kind of works, and I would love to see just man, the flip of what we've seen with the coaching staff of just like a totally new where like we have good coordinators that are desired by other teams and guys that are growing up well and like looking good. And you got, his coaching tree is pretty good who, none of those guys I don't think as a head coach has won a Super Bowl, but they've had some success. They've had playoff success. Like the newer guys, Brandon Schottenheimer obviously is under him. And like, I think that he is going to do some good things with Dallas if they can figure some things out. Kellen Moore, the Saints look like a different team the last half of the year with their offense. So again, I feel like he knows what he's doing and that he knows how to run an offense, coach an offense, create coaches that know how to coach an offense. And he knows that, like, listen, the defense, it's not my thing. Like, it's not what I'm best at. So let me get someone who's best at it. And I think that like Mike Tomlin was the opposite of like defense is my thing. I'm going to do defense and offensively. I want it to look like this. Let me just try. Let me just give it a chance. Let me get someone who's going to just let me do what I want with the offense. And we saw what happened there. So it's just very encouraging, hands down.
The last thing I want to touch on, and maybe you got a little bit more, but the final thing that I wanted to just ask you about is as far as him pretty much already taking over the play calling. I mean, he said that pretty much straight up in his press conference. Does that give you a little bit more excitement, any more or less than we've had? I mean, obviously our offensive coordinators have been pretty despicable the last, 5 or 6 years, but, do you want to give him the keys to the city?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's very encouraging. I think hearing that because it's like, okay, we don't have to wait necessarily for another name. Like we know that the offense is going to be run by him. And like you mentioned, statistically, he's had some amazing offenses. And like, really throughout his tenure, like I don't know, this would be another statistic, but I don't really know if he's like run a bad offense. Like, unless he had there was one year where both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers were hurt. There was another year, like the years Aaron Rodgers was hurt, when Dak Prescott was hurt his first year with Dallas. So, barring a quarterback injury where they're out for a majority of time, I feel like his offense was always putting up good points. And even still, sometimes those injured guys, he was putting up good points. So, I totally trust his play calling abilities. And I think that if you even go back to, his last year at Dallas, it wasn't really the offense that was causing them to go 7-10. Their defense was pretty horrendous. So I totally trust him with play calling, and I'm relieved that he's doing it, and we know that. And with Arthur Smith, it was like, okay, like he's doing play calling, but like he hasn't really had like a lot of success. Like the Tennessee stuff, like it was okay. It was okay. Like it was like, all right, maybe. But with him, it's like, okay, we know. Like we know. Like he he took. I mean, he play called a Super Bowl against the best defense of the year and shredded them. So I mean, like I trust him fully.
I just did a little digging while you were talking there. So he has had 5 seasons when his offense finished bottom half in the league in points for. And this is again just half of the league. So 16 and better, he's pretty much had his entire career in. The seasons that he didn't, 2020 with Dallas, he was 17th. That's when Dak got hurt, I'm pretty sure.
Wow, 17th with I don't even know who their quarterback. Cooper Rush? I don't know.
Cooper Rush, yeah, you're right. He was 21st in his final year with Dallas, which was 2024. He was 21st with Green Bay in 2017, which I think that was his final year with Green Bay. Is that right?
His final year was 2018. 2017 was, I think, completely, besides like 3 games, Brett Huntley, if you remember him.
Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
21st in 2017. 2006 with Green Bay, he was 22nd, which I think that was his first year as a head coach, if I remember that right.
Yes, and I believe that was the Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers both getting hurt.
Correct. And then the worst year that he's ever had calling plays was 2005 when he was the offensive coordinator with San Francisco. He was 30th in the league that year. So there's only been 5 times in 24 years with him at the helm calling an offense that they've finished in the bottom half of the league. And again, that's 17 and worse. So That's 5 years and 24 years. That's pretty remarkable that those are the only stinkers that he has. And again, we talked about how there are some underlying factors as to why that was the case.
Yeah, and I think that it's funny that you mentioned that because when I was looking at his history this year, I saw that 2005 Niners thing because it felt so out of place. And it was so crazy that he ended up getting a head coaching job after that year because that year was, again, not the greatest for him. But interestingly enough, so we have a common denominator in all 5 seasons. Alex Smith, the rookie, was hurt for a majority of that year. So, I mean, it's like the only time he was below 16th was when he didn't have a starting quarterback, which, who can say that they could do that for a whole season without their starting quarterback? Not a lot of guys. So I think that that's very encouraging to hear that statistic. And I think that I'm excited. I'm excited, and I'm really just looking forward to what we have as a team, what we're going to put together, what we're going to develop and evolve and adapt. And I'm just also duly excited. I feel like we didn't really talk about it at all, but just, yeah, his hometown vibes that he brings. Like Art Rooney, we're not a huge fan of him as a leader of a football team, but he made me like him when he was like, "Today is my dad's what did he or
Granddad's
birthday?
birthday. Granddad's
Yeah,
birthday.
granddad's birthday." And then he also was like, I'm excited to announce a coach like on his birthday, and I'm sure like he'd be even more excited to hear that he grew up in whatever suburb of Pittsburgh. And I was just like, that's just so cool, like that's just awesome. And then when he was talking about just growing up, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is great. Like this is great. This is what Pittsburgh is. This is what I like. I know, okay, look, he's not young. This isn't his first job. But this is what Pittsburgh wants. Like I feel like in both the strategical way and the emotional way, like this is a guy that we can get behind.
If you're listening to us right now and you were thinking that we were going to be negative about this, perhaps like a lot of the Steelers Nation has been, this was probably a surprise to you because I think we've hyped this up a lot. And I will say that I'm going to hold him to the same standards that I've held Mike Tomlin in the last several years because, frankly, the same hand that Tomlin was dealt this year is the hand that McCarthy is going to be dealt this upcoming season. There's not a lot of guaranteed roster turnover. And again, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, then there's another name that was on the block for being some turnover that would be coming back as well. Again, there's some key pieces that we're probably going to need back, but as far as it goes, he's got about the same hand that Mike Tomlin had this season where he went 10-7 and had another first round playoff exit. I'm still going to hold Mike McCarthy to that same standard. And I think, again, the reason Art Rooney brought McCarthy in was because he wants to still be able to succeed now. And whether or not that's the right decision or not, that's the decision that he made. So I'm still going to hold him to that high standard. And maybe the standard isn't the standard anymore, but maybe this is the time where the standard starts to rise a little bit. And the flavor with which we try to achieve that also changes a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that I completely agree, and I think that this is the guy you want to pick if you do want to win now, because I think that he probably, I mean, any of the coaches right now, I think that he's the one that could the most, and I think that, like, yeah, this has been super positive, and I am super positive. The only, like, minor concern I have, and it's not the same as Mike Tomlin, because obviously, like, throughout his time, he's won playoff games. He won a playoff game with Dallas. He obviously had a lot. He had a lot of playoff success with Green Bay, though. After that first Super Bowl, they couldn't get back to the Super Bowl, and there was a lot of talk about that. It was normally more on Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers has lost a lot of NFC championship games. So if he comes back, we won't really be able to tell who was the factor there. But with Dallas, we'll be able to see, like, because Dallas is known for not getting past the divisional round since 1995. So, how much of that is him? How much is that? Him having roots in Marty Schottenheimer, it's like, oh, I don't know. So it's like that's the only thing is like, okay, yeah, like he's had struggles in the playoffs as well, which but he's won more. Like he's gotten to more important games more frequently than Mike Tomlin has, obviously. So I think that is encouraging, but it is something where it's like, and like I was gonna mention this probably more, but he mentioned it in the press conference of like you got to win a Super Bowl. Like that's all that matters. Like win a championship. That's what I'm here to do. And so I'm like, yeah, it's the truth. Like if you don't win the Super Bowl, even like you look at the Rams, Sean McVay is a great head coach, but again, hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl since 2021. It's like that's gonna heat's gonna start to rise, and Rams fans are gonna start to get upset, even though we right now would probably do anything to swap with the Rams and their success they've had the past 5 years. So I'm excited, and yeah, I agree. The standard is the standard. Win a playoff game. If you can win a playoff game in his first year, that would be insane. But yeah, win a championship. We got to win a Super Bowl.
That's the standard. That's the standard we're holding things to, and maybe this is the next Pittsburgh head coach that finds a way to win one. Now, it might be too little too late because the Patriots are going to be in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks' time, and they might be the first to 7. And that would not sit well with me. And it almost kind of validates my opinion that it took too long to get to this point. So, not that I'm predicting them to win. Honestly, I think that Seattle, with the way they've been playing, they might just go on and do it. That was one of your predictions. I guess you predicted the Bills to beat them in the Super Bowl, but you were correct in saying that they were going to get there.
Yeah, I've kind of been in love with the Seahawks this whole year just because, I don't know, there's something about, I do like Mike Macdonald because I have never heard him speak a single word, and he's 14-3 in the Super Bowl, so I was just like, that's cool. And then I'm just in love with this turnaround of Sam Darnold. For some reason, he's very endearing, and yeah, I did pick them to go to the Super Bowl. I picked Buffalo to win just based off the storyline. Obviously, that didn't work out, but I do think that, I don't, this is interesting. This is random, but I mean, people are still calling Patriots frauds, and I'm just like, okay, maybe there's some validity to that, but also they're in the Super Bowl. But I do think that if the Seahawks play the way they've played, they're on a 9-game win streak. I think, I just don't see anybody beating them.
Well, again, you figure who the Patriots played. They played C.J. Stroud, who, again, even in our game, was actively trying to lose the game and had probably one of the worst 2 games of a playoff performance in NFL history. Certainly top 5 in that regard. He was abysmal. And then they have to play Jared Stidham. It's they did
in the snow,
right,
in the downpour,
They did the bare minimum to actually win that game. And again, the conditions maybe are an equalizing factor there, but again, I mean, there's reason to believe that they still haven't beaten anybody good yet. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm not super concerned. I'm not sure I'll watch it. I don't really care for either of these two teams, but that is what it is. But I really hope that the Seahawks win so that we can have the next chance to get to be the first to 7.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We've been the first to 3. Wait, first to, I think, is it first to 3 and first to 4? Or no? Yeah, we're first to 3 and first to 4, and then we were first to 6. So it'd be great to be first to 7. And yeah, I would love Seattle to win. They'd only have 2 rings. Jackson Smith-Jigba, my Ohio State guy, I would love to see him get a ring. I'd love to see him have some amazing moments in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I would just, no, I don't think anyone but Patriots fans are rooting for the Patriots, besides maybe the Rams and the Niners. So it'll be interesting. I'll probably tune into the Super Bowl just because, but it's pretty familiar. Not almost 10 years ago, we had the same exact matchup.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Well, as far as the Mike McCarthy hiring goes, I think that's about all we have for this one. I think we dived into a lot of the details, both as far as his actual tenure goes, as well as his actual philosophy goes. And I think philosophy is something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast, as far as, sometimes we just don't really like the philosophy. And again, maybe the way that Mike McCarthy was hired was the wrong philosophy from the ownership standpoint. But as far as Mike McCarthy's philosophy, there's some stuff to like here. And maybe we're being overly positive and maybe it'll all come crashing down. But I think a very interesting flavor to this episode. I don't know if most listeners that are listening to us thought we were going to be this positive, but indeed we were. So make sure you give us your thoughts on the Mike McCarthy hiring. Perhaps our opinions changed your opinions in a way. And again, opinions are subject to change. So let us know what you think of the Mike McCarthy hiring. Maybe you give it a little bit of extra time and kind of marinate on this a little bit. But let us know what you think. As always, you can follow us on Instagram at Boardman and Gold. And as always, Boardman Black and Gold is sponsored by Zecca Enterprises, crafting furniture solutions in northwestern Pennsylvania. You can call 919-406-4679 to turn your furniture problems into furniture solutions. Be sure to keep your eye out for David's special episode, which will be coming out in a handful of days. That is not something that you're going to want to miss. And I'm not going to spoil even the title of that episode yet, because I want you all to just listen to it with perfectly unadulterated ears for the first time. I want you to hear it for the first time, like the way that I heard it for the first time just a couple of days ago, or actually, that was just yesterday. Feels like such a long time ago, but it was a great episode. Be sure that you tune into that one. David's got a little. I don't even want to tell anybody. I don't want to tell anybody even a sliver of what's going to happen in that episode. But David, he's got a good one for us.
Oh yeah, I'm super excited for that to come out, and I'm just very excited for the future of Pittsburgh right now, and we'll have some upcoming decisions that we'll be waiting with anticipation, and more. The anticipation will be more excitement than I think we've had for a while. So a lot of excitement to go around right now.
I feel like we say that every offseason, don't we?
I feel like last season we were pretty negative.
I think after some stuff happened, we were negative, but I think early on, well, actually, no, I think you're right. 2 years ago, we were super positive.
Yes, yeah. 2 years ago, we were going for the moon. We thought, I was calling for an MVP Kenny Pickett season.
Well, that didn't happen. I'm sorry.
No, maybe on his 7th or 8th team. You never know.
That would be funny. Well, as far as the Bourbon Black and Gold podcast goes, I'm Zane, joined by David DeSantis. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll see you in David's very special episode in a few days.